Hi, I'm Dan McIntyre. I'm the General Manager at the Dublin San Ramon Services District, and I'd like to welcome all of you to our 2022 Candidates Briefing. So this is an opportunity for people to learn a little bit more about DSRSD as you consider whether you're interested in running for our DSRSD Board of Directors. I appreciate you spending the time and considering serving as on our Board of Directors. It's an important public service for people to think about stepping up and becoming the policy leaders of the Dublin San Ramon Services District. I'm joined by two key staff members at the Dublin San Ramon Services District. So we have Jan Lee, our Assistant General Manager, and we also have Nicole Genzali, and she is the District Secretary for DSRSD. So we've got 4 segments. I'm doing the first 2 segments, and then Jan's doing a segment, and then Nicole is closing for us. It'll take us about an hour. If you want to ask a question as we go along, we're informal. That's certainly fine. You can unmute yourself and ask a question as we go. That won't be a problem. So feel free to do that as we go. We'll make ourselves available for up to a half an hour at the end of our 1-hour overview for general questions and answers. So if you want to hold your questions till then or do a really deep dive at that point, by all means, feel free. So Jan, why don't you go ahead and start our PowerPoint, and I will begin the overview of DSRSD. So I'm, again, Dan McIntyre. I've been the General Manager at DSRSD for about 6 years. And let's go on to our next slide. So the overview of Dublin San Ramon Services District. So what is Dublin San Ramon Services District? So go ahead and click. So we are a special district, and there are different varieties of special district. We happen to be an independent special district, which means we have our own elected board of directors. So we're not a subsidiary entity of like Alameda County or Contra Costa County, like some special districts are. We're our own separate political entity. We're an enterprise special district. So that means we're not funded by property taxes or sales taxes or transit occupancy taxes, things that cities tend to be funded by. We're funded by direct charges and fees for our water, wastewater, and recycled water services. We are a community services district. So there's actually probably something like 20 flavors of special districts under state law. And we happen to be a community services district. And that's the law that we operate under. And each flavor of special district is slightly different. And we're a special district as distinct from a city or a county government. So, like I said, we're a separate form of government in California. And to give you a sense of scale, there's actually 3,400 special districts throughout California. That compares to 468 cities and 58 counties. And some of those special districts are dependent districts. They're part of a county. Or many are like us, independent special districts. And for further sense of scale, how many school districts are there that are separate from special districts? There's over 1,000 school districts. So those are the forms of government that we have in California. And the most numerous one, I think to many people's surprise, are special districts. And special districts range from things like us providing utilities to cemetery districts, to park districts, to fire districts. There's just a whole range of districts. So DSRSD's primary responsibility is being in charge of water in all its forms. Before the city of San Ramon and the city of Dublin incorporated in the 1980s, we actually provided some other municipal services when those were community villages or county villages, but we're now focused just on our core business, which is water, wastewater, and recycled water. And it's interesting to note that in our service area, we've in the last 17 years built a very robust recycled water program. And actually, over the course of a year, about 25% of our total water supply is recycled water that we use for irrigation of a lot of public landscaping and parks and schools and medians and so on. That's a quarter of our water is recycled water. And Jan will get into a little bit, focusing especially on water later. So we're the water provider, wastewater provider, and recycled provider in Dublin, parts of San Ramon, and by contract to Pleasanton. So here's a map of the areas we serve. So you see, obviously, the city of Dublin in green, and that kind of makes sense. And the services we provide there are wastewater collection, wastewater treatment, drinking potable water, and recycled water. In southern San Ramon, the light tan area, we provide sewer collection and wastewater treatment services. Up in Doherty Valley, northeast San Ramon, that area in blue, we serve drinking potable water and recycled water. The sewer up there goes up to Central San because of geographical areas. So Dublin, San Ramon, and Doherty Valley are our political boundary, and elected officials are elected from those areas. The city of Pleasanton is also served for wastewater treatment by contract, but they're not in our political boundary. So they're a contractor that pay the bill, but they're not involved in being elected to the board of directors. So they're a customer rather than the constituent part of the Dublin San Ramon Services District. So governance, how is DSRSD a special district governed? So our ultimate bosses are the citizens of Dublin and portions of San Ramon, and they elect a 5-member board of directors, and those board of directors serve staggered 4-year terms, and the elections are held in November of even-numbered years, the same year as congressional elections. And then the board appoints a chief executive officer, the general manager, in my case, me right now, and I work directly for the board, and I'm responsible for appointing all of the other staff at the district, but I'm responsible to the board of directors to see that their policy, directives, and decisions are implemented. So how does the board manage and run the district's business? So the board of directors is a part-time activity. There is a stipend that's received, but it's mostly volunteer work. I mean, there's a payment per day of service of $195 a day, but a lot of it could be considered community service work. So it's not full-time hands-on management by the board. The board directs the general manager. So the main reason, or the main way that the board can influence and give direction to the organization is through public meetings. So there are 2 public meetings, similar to city council meetings or board of supervisor meetings, and those are publicly noticed, and agenda items are discussed, and the board makes decisions, gives direction to the general manager and staff. A board majority directs the general manager at the board meeting. So there's 5 people, and 3, 4, or 5 yes votes give direction on where to go. And the direction to the general manager, me, or my successor in later years, takes the form of a variety of things. The most basic form is the district code. That's our law. It's similar to like a municipal code. So we actually have an adopted code online that you can go in and see certain permanent procedures of law that we follow. The board also adopts policies, and these policies are reviewed every few years or more frequently as the board chooses. And the board oftentimes changes these policies every few years. It's very common for the board to change its policies, and those serve as standing orders that we follow. Also, every 2 years, the board adopts a strategic plan, a 5-year plan, a work program of some major activities that it would like to see the general manager and the staff pursue over the next 5 years. And then after that, the next layer is the operating and capital budgets. So every 2 years, the board of directors approves our operating and capital budget. We have an operating budget of about $75 million a year, and our capital budget each year is about $25 million a year. And so by adopting a budget, you're providing the resources and setting both minimum expectations and limits on what can be spent in pursuit of the directives of the strategic plan and other directions of the board. The board can also adopt resolutions from time to time, which are standing written orders that can be followed. And sometimes the board just has verbal direction. They just say by consensus, we would like to make a change on our water conservation procedures, for example, or something else. And so that happens from time to time where the board just discusses and gives the general manager direction in the board meetings. So here's our election division boundary map, and you see divisions 1 and 2 are up in San Ramon, so Doherty and southern San Ramon. And then you see down in Dublin, divisions 3, 4, and 5. And the divisions that are up for election this year are divisions 2, 4, and 5. Divisions 1 and 3 will be in the next cycle in 2024. So DSRSD, we have 132 approved full-time staff, and we work in 3 main facilities, and we're showing the pictures there. We're speaking tonight from the district office, the building at the top right there on Dublin Boulevard. So maybe about 40 or 45 of us work there. That's our engineering group, our customer service and billing folks, our human resources and finance staff, our public affairs staff, and our district secretary. Then kind of our core facility, I would say, is our regional wastewater treatment plant facility on Johnson Drive in Pleasanton. So an interesting historical footnote is at one time, the DSRSD's boundary actually did run a little bit on the south side of Interstate 580 and encompassed our wastewater treatment plant there at the intersection of Stone Ridge Drive and Johnson Drive. So we have our wastewater treatment plant there, and we also have our recycled water plant. So it's kind of two facilities on one property, two adjacent facilities on one property. And then our third facility is our field operations facility. That's in a repurposed industrial building in Pleasanton on Commerce Circle. Field operations houses those staff that are responsible for cleaning the sewer lines in Dublin and San Ramon and operating the drinking water or the potable water and the recycled water in Dublin and Doherty Valley. So we have about 20 people that work in that facility, and at the regional wastewater treatment plant, we have about probably about 45 people working there. So with that, I'll pause with any questions, and if you have no questions at the moment, I'll dive then into a 10-minute chat about some of the district's finances, and then after that, I'll turn it over to Jan Lee. Any interim questions for the time being? Okay, let's go ahead then and dive into our finance overview and give you just a quick overview on the district's finances. So we actually operate 3 separate businesses, and we actually account for them separately. So the funds and the resources that fund these are not put into like one common pool. They're actually kept segregated, and we have our financial statements and our budgets, and we keep the revenues and the expenses for each of the business totally separate. So our first business is water. So we distribute drinking water and recycled water. And that business is about a $35 million business a year. Then our next system is, okay, where do you flush to? So the collection system from your home to the wastewater treatment plant is called the local wastewater system, or the collection system, it might be called. And that's about a $4 million business. And then our third business is the regional wastewater treatment plant, and that's responsible for treatment of wastewater and also disposal of our biosolids and wastewater that we don't recycle. Our regional wastewater business is about a $25 million business. So in aggregate, we're about, if I did the numbers right, we're about a $75 million a year business if you looked at the 3 businesses combined for the one district. Okay, so though we're a government, we run like a business. So as I said before, we're not funded by property taxes or transit-oriented taxes or sales taxes. We're funded by fee for service, and we have to do studies that show that we're collecting the revenues through charges that are just needed to meet our needs. So it's to operate the system, to maintain and rehabilitate and replace the system if we need to reline a sewer line or rebuild a pump or a digester or something. All of that is covered by the business expense. If we need to expand our infrastructure to serve new development, we account for that separately, and developers pay special fees for expansion improvements that are needed to serve new development, such as a new water tank. We're building 2 new water tanks here in the next couple of years to serve new development in Eastern Dublin. And then we also build and sustain reserves so that we get into a time of financial crisis, say a major natural disaster, or when we went through shelter in place during the COVID, you have reserves so you can keep meeting your expenses during crises. And the board of directors, that's one of the big policy decisions they make is how much money should we have in reserves? What's the right amount? What's not too much? What's not too little? And that's a fundamental policy decision that the board makes from time to time and revisits. So we do cover our expenses through water and wastewater rates. We try to conduct a rate study every 5 years, does a detailed analysis of who all the customers are, what's the cost of providing service to different customers, We look at what our revenue requirements are. We look at our cost of services. And we also have to be mindful of a lot of state mandates, whether that's by the state legislature or whether it's by previous citizen statewide initiatives that we have to follow that set certain criteria, minimum standards for us, certain things we must do or shall not do. That has to be considered also in managing the district's finances for its 3 businesses. So one of the first things we do is look at the revenue requirement. How much money does it need to properly meet all of the business needs? So for our water program, the water rates must cover the cost to treat, store, and distribute the water to our customers. Go back. Okay. The local wastewater collection rates cover the cost to collect and transport the wastewater. And then our regional wastewater treatment rates must cover the cost to treat and dispose of the cleaned wastewater. So each of those costs are calculated separately, and then we make sure the rate for that function covers just that. So there's no blending or crossover between the cost and the fees for each of these 3 services. So how do we establish water rates? Drilling into the detail on water rates. So they're based on the volume of water used for residential customers, and for commercial and industrial customers, it is also based on the volume of water used. Just an interesting footnote looking into the past, at one point we used to have tiered water rate structures similar to how PG&E tiers their electrical rates, but there was a court case that came down and said that those agencies that were doing that activity in many cases throughout the state were not following the requirements of citizen initiative that was passed back in 1996. And so we had to adjust. And now we set our rates based on volume of water use. That was a change we made about 3 or 4 years ago. So how do we establish wastewater treatment rates? So for residential customers, the rate is proportional to the volume of your winter water usage, kind of your baseline wastewater usage that you flush to the wastewater treatment plant. For commercial and industrial customers, though, it's a little different, because not only are there costs associated with the volume of wastewater that comes to the plant, but it's also the quality of what is in the wastewater can contribute to what the cost is of the wastewater. So, for example, the most obvious example is some industrial processes or restaurants with a lot of fats, oils, and greases. That is more expensive to treat than like waste shower water from a residence. And so there's actually an extra cost then for wastewater that has more funk in it, if you will. So we do detailed calculations in our 5-year study to properly make sure everybody is carrying their fair share of the cost of treating the wastewater, and it varies from residential to industrial to commercial accounts. And residential is by flow, and the other 2 are in part by flow, but in part by the content of the waste that is in their wastewater flow. So how do we collect rates? So residential water rates are billed bi-monthly. So for those of you in our water service area, you're familiar with that, and you get our bi-monthly bills. And if you want to monitor your water usage and what your bill is going to look like, you can use our AquaHawk software. So you can come into the district webpage and sign up on our AquaHawk portal and get a personalized information on your water use, particularly important during this period of drought. And something like 60 or 70% of our customers are actually signed up for AquaHawk. I don't know that everybody uses it, but it's a cool program or a cool web venue to look at your account. The residential wastewater rates for residences are placed on the property tax bill. And you see here what it looks like on your bill. It would say DSRSD sewer service charge. So if you looked on your property tax bill and you see, the overall tax from the county and then a number of smaller fees like mosquito abatement and BART tax, you'll see this on your bill if you're a sewer customer of the district. And in Alameda County, it's under the heading of fixed charges and or special assessments. In Contra Costa County, it's under the heading special taxes and assessments, but you'll see this. And for our commercial and industrial water and wastewater rates, those are billed bi-monthly based on, we look at your volume of flow to calculate the charge, and we bill that to commercial customers bi-monthly. So one of the big things, big expenses, that's about a quarter of our budget. So our operating budget's about $75 million a year. Our capital budget's about $25 million to go build things. Here you see us on the right, building some new primary clarifiers at our wastewater treatment plant to serve new development. So we used to have 4 primary clarifiers. In the last couple of years, we had to expand the size of our 4th clarifier and add a 5th clarifier. And you can see that construction going on. That was a huge 3-year project, $19 million, lots of concrete, a lot of work. So some of our work we do is replacement work. So as our water tanks and our water lines age, we have to replace that infrastructure. We do that through capacity reserve fees on new development, on interest, and operating transfers from ratepayers. So there's money that is set aside into our capital accounts to take care of long-term infrastructure. And it would be like setting aside money to pay for a re-roof on your house. We're doing the same thing with our physical assets in the district. And then we also have expansion projects to serve new development. So those are funded by capacity reserve fees on new development. There's also some other revenues and grants that pay for that, and also some interest earnings that help us meet our expansion projects. And this project you see on the right was an expansion project that was paid for entirely by new development through connection fees on new development. So how do we establish and collect fees? So we develop a 10-year capital improvement plan for our infrastructure needs. We look at what infrastructure we need to expand to serve new development. And we look at our existing infrastructure and determine what replacements are we going to need to do. I mean, just a couple of big replacement projects we've done recently, or one that we've done recently and one we just started. We just replaced about 2 miles of water line at Camp Parks that was installed in the 1940s, needed rehabs. That was a major multi-million-dollar project. And then in Western Dublin off Village Parkway and 2 residential areas, we're going to replace 2 more miles of water line over the next year. And that's about a $5 million project. So we plan for that in our 10-year capital budget. We perform a capacity reserve fee study to calculate the fee to fund future infrastructure and also debt service on earlier infrastructure. So some of the infrastructure that we've built for new development, and this is primarily for our recycled water program, we actually did that with borrowing, and then developers through their fees pay the debt service on the borrowing that was done years ago. And we periodically update our fees studies. We do a formal study and a public hearing at the board of directors meeting. So with that, I'll pause and ask if there's any questions on that topic. And then after that, we'll turn it over to Jan Lee to talk about a current issue, kind of our long-term water supply, something of particular interest during this period of drought. Any questions at the moment? If you have questions, do unmute yourself and ask, or you can post something in the chat. We'll read it off and hit it.
Hi, this is Jim Brady. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're one of our former Citizens Water Academy attendees, right? From about 4 years ago?
Yes, sir.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Dan. Hi, guys. I wanted to ask a general question. Last night, the service fees were increased, correct?
Yes, actually, the board took action on that a couple of weeks ago. And last night, they took a final action just to have us report those on the property tax bill. There's an extra step we have to take. So we have 2% rate increases for our local and regional wastewater charge that you'll see on your property tax bill this next year.
Okay. For the district being run like 3 businesses, is it, what was the amount? What was the percentage? Was it a 1/3 increase per division, that type of thing?
So what we did is some of our fees are in different cycles. So our water fees, we typically adjust in January. And there was an increase at that time of about 3.1%, and that was based on a CPI index at the time. So water fees are adjusted in January. Okay. The regional and local wastewater fees are done in July. Those are typically done independently. We did not have a time because of staffing constraints to do the 5-year study. That was a comprehensive review of those 2 fees this spring. So we did just a small adjustment, and we made it the same for both of 2%. But for the regional, which is the treatment, and local, which is the collection, typically those numbers would not match because you're calculating the fees separately in separate studies for those 2. But we just happened by coincidence to just make it a 2% inflation type adjustment but that's a rare occurrence.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Okay. So now Jan Lee, our Assistant General Manager, is going to take over and talk about current hot topic, water supply challenges for DSRSD in the Tri-Valley.
Okay, good evening. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. I saw a thumbs up. So as Dan mentioned, I'm Jan Lee. I'm the Assistant General Manager for Dublin-San Ramon Services District. So tonight I'm going to talk a bit about the Tri-Valley's water supply, so where our water comes from. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we're facing, and then also some of the solutions that we're exploring to improve long-term water resiliency. So just briefly, this pie chart shows the primary sources of supply for the Tri-Valley. And what you can see is the largest portion of the pie, which is this dark blue area. About 70% of the supply that comes into the Tri-Valley is imported state water project water that Zone 7 Water Agency distributes to the retailers in this the retailers in this area, which include Dublin-San Ramon Services District. This red area of the pie is local runoff from Arroyo Val that's captured in Lake Del Val. And these are average percentages. Of course, the amount of imported water or groundwater varies year to year based on hydrology. The green area is natural groundwater. And then the purple area is recycled water that's produced by Dublin-San Ramon Services District, our wastewater treatment plant, and also the Livermore wastewater treatment plant. So this is recycled water that's treated and produced for irrigation. And then, as I mentioned, Zone 7 Water Agency is the region's wholesale water supply agency, and they also manage the groundwater basin. And in just a little bit, I'm going to play a video that shows the path that water takes to get to the Tri-Valley. So once the State Water Project comes into the Tri-Valley, Zone 7 treats it and provides it to the 4 retailers, which include Cal Water, Dublin-San Ramon Services District, Livermore, and Pleasanton. And then we in turn deliver it to our water customers, which are the residents of the city of Dublin and the Doherty Valley portion of the city of San Ramon. And so now I'm going to play a video that just talks about how this imported water supply gets into the valley.
How in the world does water get to the Tri-Valley? Approximately 70% of water used in the Tri-Valley is imported from outside our region. How in the world does it get here? Our journey begins at one of the highest points in California, in the beautiful Sierra Nevada mountains. Snow falls here, becoming snowpack each winter. In the spring, that snow melts and begins our water's journey through Feather Falls. The freshly melted water flows over the falls and down into Lake Oroville, a precious reservoir for our state's water system. When it is needed, the California Department of Water Resources releases water through the Oroville Dam into the Feather River. Water travels along the Feather River for over 100 miles through Northern California into the Sacramento River, continuing until it finally reaches the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. Commonly known as the California Delta, Bay Delta, or simply the Delta, this is a key fork in the road for our state water project system, where water begins to diverge in different directions. 29 water agencies across the state of California are direct beneficiaries of the State Water Project. Water coming to the Tri-Valley is pumped from the Delta into the California Aqueduct. Water from the California Aqueduct flows into Bethany Reservoir, where it can be pumped into the South Bay Aqueduct. The South Bay Aqueduct is a series of man-made pipes and channels that brings most of our water into the Tri-Valley. Water flows another 40 miles along the South Bay Aqueduct into the Tri-Valley, starting at Patterson Pass Reservoir. Some water is treated there and begins its journey to do a world of good in our homes and businesses. During wet years, Zone 7 stores excess surface water in groundwater banks that can be used during dry years. Some water continues another 10 miles on to Lake Del Val. Lake Del Val is another reservoir that holds the majority of our surface water until we need it. Then it is treated at our larger treatment facility, Del Val Water Treatment Plant. From the peaks of the Sierra Nevada to the heart of the Tri-Valley, water travels over 200 miles on this wondrous journey before beginning the treatment process that makes it safe for our use.
Okay, so that was a video that Zone 7 and the retailers collaborated on to help educate the community on where our water comes from. There's many people within the valley that tend to think that most of our water supply is local and not imported. So this was one of the efforts that we've embarked on to try to make sure that our community understands some of the basics of where our water supply comes from, so they can understand some of the challenges that we're facing. So talking about some of these challenges, as you heard, about 70% of the Tri-Valley supplies are imported through the Delta. And the Delta is a critical component of our conveyance system, and it's also one of the major vulnerabilities in our system. Over the past decades, the Delta ecosystem has been in decline. Water quality has been degrading. There's been adverse impacts to endangered species. The Delta is formed by a series of man-made levees that are aging, and they're vulnerable to earthquakes and sea level rise. And over the past decades, and particularly in 2008 and 2009, federal and state agencies have implemented increasingly more stringent regulations and environmental protections that limit pumping from the Delta. So to help protect the Delta, they've restricted the amount of water that can be pumped from the Delta, which of course then impacts the amount of supply that can come to the Tri-Valley. The other challenge facing us is climate change. We're seeing evidence of climate change. The dry years are getting drier, the wet years are getting wetter, and we're also seeing a shift in the weather pattern and when we get snow and when snow melts. So definitely something else that's affecting us. And what this is all leading up to is the reliability of our water supply has been declining. We've seen statewide about a 20% reduction in the amount of water that comes through the state water project since 2008. And we're expecting further deterioration. So if we don't take any action, we don't do any new projects, the Tri-Valley could be facing some more severe water shortages in the future. And to put this into context, we are now in 2022 in the third year of a severe drought, and we're asking our customers to cut back 15%. If we were to do nothing and implement no new projects, we could be looking at water supply shortages in the range of 50 to 70% in the future by the year 2040. So the do nothing alternative is not an option for us. So what are we doing to bolster water supply reliability? Zone 7 Water Agency, in cooperation and collaboration with the retailers and other regional partners, they're looking at a broad array of potential supply, storage, and conveyance projects. And some of them are listed in this table here. And what we see is that we really need a combination of 2 or more projects to address long-term water resiliency. Our thinking has shifted over the last 5 years. We used to really talk about supply, but now we really talk about supply, storage, and conveyance needs as a 3-legged stool. We need options to move water to the Tri-Valley that don't rely solely on the Delta, so a so-called non-Delta conveyance option. We need more storage, preferably storage that's located upstream of the Delta, and then we do need some added supply as well. On this map shown on the right-hand side, you can see the location of some of these projects. What you'll see is that most of them are not located in the Tri-Valley. The only one that's a local project is potable reuse or purified water, but most of them are located throughout the kind of the Northern California area. They're outside of Zone 7 service area, and they involve multiple regional partners. I also want to note, and I'll touch on this at the end of the presentation, that conservation and recycled water are really key parts of the solution. The more that we can do to manage our demands and utilize or fully utilize recycled water, that lessens the need for additional potable water supply. So they're definitely part of the solution, and we consider them as we do our plans for long-term water resiliency. So I wanted to talk about 4 of the projects in that table that we've been working on, or Zone 7's been working on with some of these regional partners. The first is Delta Conveyance. Delta Conveyance is a project that would construct a large diameter tunnel that would take water from the Sacramento River, go under the Delta, and then connect just upstream of where the South Delta pumps are located. So the pumps that both bring water into the Tri-Valley and then also pump water down to Southern California. And this is a large tunnel. It would be about 36 feet in diameter. So you can kind of picture a 3-story building as the height of this tunnel. It's also located, it would be located about 200 feet below the surface. The thought of this tunnel would be to move large amounts of water when we have those big storms. So take that big gulp of water and move it down to Southern California and into the Bay Area and store it in reservoirs. But this project is controversial because the State Water Project is the primary source of supply for Zone 7. Zone 7 has participated in the Delta Conveyance Project and continues to participate in it. But there are concerns, and you'll hear a number of them, you know, from looking through the paper and the media. There's concerns that water's being diverted when it could be going and flowing into the Delta. It's also an expensive project. The estimated price tag for this project is about $16 billion. There's questions of how well the Delta Conveyance Project will work. As it's currently envisioned, it's taking those wet year storm events and moving water to be stored, but you know, as climate change is occurring, there's some questions on how much water could be moved. And as time goes on, there's been a shift in thinking that the Delta Conveyance Project doesn't necessarily add new water supply, but it preserves the status quo. So it prevents further declines in long-term water supply reliability. And over time, we've also kind of shifted our thinking with Delta Conveyance to look at it not necessarily, you know, as that supply project, but more as that insurance project for if there was a catastrophic event in the Delta and we didn't have that ability to move water through the Delta. Another project, which would be a new source of supply, is Sites Reservoir. Sites Reservoir would be located in Northern California on the west side of the Sacramento Valley, approximately 10 miles west of Maxwell in Colosa County. It's a 1.5 million acre foot off-stream reservoir at a price tag about $3 billion. If Zone 7 participated, this project would provide additional water supplies in dry years for Zone 7. Something a little bit more closer to the Tri-Valley is the expansion of the Los Vaqueros Reservoir, which is located in Brentwood. So this is an existing reservoir that various partner agencies are looking at expanding from about 160,000 acre feet to 275,000 acre feet. Again, it's an off-stream reservoir. One of the key components of this project, something that really interests Zone 7 and DSRSD, is this Transfer Bethany pipeline, which would connect from Contra Costa Water District's systems that would take water from Los Vaqueros Reservoir and directly pipe it to the South Bay Aqueduct. So again, it would bypass the Delta, so it's a non-Delta conveyance system, and would provide that insurance again in case there was an event in the Delta that made the South Delta pumps unusable. And then really the only local project that's being evaluated in this suite of options is potable reuse or purified water. Potable reuse is taking wastewater and treating it to a level that far exceeds the level required for irrigation. So it's a high level of treatment that produces water that's suitable to augment drinking water supplies. So in 2018, the Tri-Valley agencies, which are Zone 7 and the retailers, completed a feasibility study looking at the potential for potable reuse within the Tri-Valley. The study found that potable reuse is feasible. It could provide about 7 to 15% of our water supply if we decided to implement it. And the next steps recommended in the study were some follow-on technical studies and also some outreach that Zone 7 is spearheading to educate the community and businesses about our water supply challenges and potential solutions. And that video you saw earlier is one of the efforts that's being done as part of that outreach program.
I'm sorry, Jen, would you repeat?
Yeah.
Would you please repeat how much adding that project would do for potable?
Yeah, absolutely, Meryl. It would produce about 7 to 15% of the Tri-Valley's water supply. So we're looking at maybe about 5,000 to 7,000 acre feet a year. Okay, and then in terms of long-term conservation, as I mentioned, both conservation, demand management, and recycled water are key components of our ability to improve long-term water reliability. Statewide, since the last drought, we've reduced our water usage by about 16%, which has been fantastic. So, keep it up. And then as Dan mentioned, DSRSD's recycled water program is very successful. About 25% of the water that we provide to our customers is recycled water. And that percentage increases to about a third in the summertime. So almost 100% of all the parks and the schools within our service area are served with recycled water, and about 50% of all the commercial landscaping is provided with recycled water. So as you're driving around our community and you maybe see some parks or schools that look a little greener and you're kind of wondering why when everyone else is trying to conserve, just keep in mind and look for the signage that it's likely on recycled water. But of course, with all this success comes challenges, and one of the challenges that we're faced with is demand hardening. So as our customers keep doing such a fantastic job with conserving water and using their water more efficiently, we are finding that the opportunities to conserve or implement programs to conserve water are getting tougher. And so this is something that we're going to have to monitor as we both continue with this drought, but also make our long-term plans. And so that was a little bit of water supply, very quick. We have much longer presentations and information on our website. I know this is a topic of great interest right now because of the drought. So happy to answer any questions, and also happy to point anyone to some additional information if you want to learn more.
I guess the one question that I do have, you mentioned that we're reaching, or DSRSD is reaching, about 50% of the commercial landscaping out there. Are there more purple pipes being laid, or how are you addressing new developments?
Meryl, that is a great question and one we like answering. So the challenge we have right now is that we use pretty much every drop of wastewater that comes into our plant during peak summer days. So we are supply limited now.
Wow.
We're actually a zero discharge plant to San Francisco Bay on certain days during the summer. So right now, our board has implemented a moratorium on new connections to the recycled water system until we can identify some additional sources of supply. So we are working with neighboring wastewater agencies, trying to see if there's a way to divert some of their flows to help augment our supply. We're exploring some storage options at our treatment plant, trying to use our wet weather storage basins for dry weather storage. And then we're also looking at some groundwater options as well. But there is some more room to lay some purple pipe, but we do need to find some additional supplies first.
Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions?
I had a quick question on on the Sites Reservoir that was 1.5. What was the potential capacity of that if it goes online?
Sites Reservoir is 1.5 million acre feet total. And are you Zone 7's participation or share is what, roughly somewhere in the 5,000 to 10,000 acre feet range in dry years?
Okay.
So that could provide about 20% of our water demands in dry years. So it's an intriguing project.
Certainly, yeah, certainly. And how will that be filled?
It's off stream, so it would be filled during wet weather events.
Mhm.
It would be captured there. So that, of course, is one challenge with the schedule is we need Mother Nature to help cooperate to fill the reservoir.
Absolutely. For the recycled water, I know that what our commercial development, the water trucks that run in grade sites and such, what rate do we charge them for that usage?
I might have to punt that one to Dan.
Yeah, we'd have to look that up, and I probably can't do that on the spot. Perhaps though, in the next segment, our fourth and final segment, that Nicole, our district secretary, talks, I'll run off and look on the website and give you the answer at the end of her presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it, Jan. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I think Nicole Gonzalez, our district secretary, is up. The best for the last here. So I think she's going to talk about how to run for the board. So do you want to go ahead?
Always some paperwork to do.
Do you want to go ahead and launch? Okay.
Yes, please. That'd be great. Thank you. Well, good evening again. Nice to see you. Nice to have you here this evening with us. And I won't take up too much of your time, but I think that the information that I'm going to give out here in this presentation will be useful if you do consider running for the board. Go ahead, slide. As you can see, my background is our new boardroom, and I say new because it went through some refurbishment, and we like to show it off, though lately it's just been virtually. Hopefully we'll get back to more in-person meetings, but we're proud of our boardroom, and it's here at our facility, the district office. It's here on Dublin Boulevard. So an introduction to the DSRSD Board of Directors. Besides sitting in this lovely room, we want to go ahead and kind of lay out how this works. So we have 5 directors. They're nonpartisan members that serve on our board, and they serve 4-year terms, and those are staggered. So for example, we will have, as Dan mentioned, 3 of those seats coming up for election this year. The remaining 2 will be in the next general election in 2 years. And of course, that's always in November. And each director represents a division within our service area. And at this time, we actually have a very clean boundary line, whereas we used to have some sharing of, I think it was Division 3, which is the very far west part of our service area that bled over into Contra Costa County. Our new election map now goes right along the county line. So we have 2 that sit entirely in Contra Costa County and 3 that sit entirely in Alameda County. What does our board do? They set policies, they appoint the officers, and they hire and oversee the general manager. A few of the other officers that are involved, myself as district secretary, our treasurer, and our general counsel, which is our legal representation. And we do this under the authority of the Community Services District Law, which Dan mentioned earlier. And we also do have some other requirements through the water code and other allowances through the water code as well. And I will explain that in a little more detail as we move on. So what do you do with your time as a director, right? How much time are you going to be spending in this role? Well, at a minimum, you would be attending 2 board meetings a month. So the board meetings are set by resolution for the 1st and 3rd Tuesday of each month. Now, whether or not those 2 meetings are actually held would depend on the business of the district at that time. For example, we could have very little business to attend to during part of the month, and that meeting may be canceled, or we may have additional business that needs to be attended to, and we may call a special meeting. So it can vary, but primarily you're looking at 2 meetings per month. Those are usually 1 to 2 hours, and they start typically at 6 p.m. on Tuesday nights. For each day of service, a director will earn $195. And what that covers is any events, meetings in one day. So you may have one meeting, you may have 3, and you would earn $195 flat for that entire day of service. There is a max on that for 10 days of service per month. So for example, if you had a very busy month and perhaps you attended a conference and there were additional meetings for whatever reason in that month and perhaps went over 10, you would be capped at the 10 service days of compensation. And our election system has gone through some recent changes. So our district was founded in 1953. And for all those years up until 2019, we were an at-large district, meaning that anyone within our service area could run for a seat and anyone in the service area could vote for those candidates. In 2019, we transitioned from that at-large system to a by-division system under the California Voting Rights Act. And that's what created the 5 divisions that we now have. In 2021, so very, very recently, we had to redraw those division boundaries because of the 2020 decennial census results that came out. So there were some adjustments that needed to be made to account for the change in the population in our service area in the last 10 years. The transition originally in 2019 was based on the 2010 census. So there were definitely some adjustments that needed to be reflected. And here again is our election division map. This, again, as you can see, has a nice clean divider along the county line where you see the 2 in Contra Costa County and the 3 in Alameda County. And this is really nice because anyone who is running for the board will only have to pull papers and file with 1 county versus 2, or campaign in 1 county versus 2 perhaps. So that does really ease, I think, the job of the candidates as well as the district in having a very nice, smooth election process that seems to be very clear for its constituents. Next slide. Okay, and again, we have 3 seats that are up this November 8th, divisions 2, 4, and 5. Division 2 is in Contra Costa County in our southern San Ramon area. Divisions 4 and 5 are in Alameda County, and that would be our central and east areas of Dublin. And then Division 5 seat is a little different in terms of it being a short-term appointment. What happened is in our last election cycle, we had no candidates run for that division, and the board appointed someone to that post. And in that scenario, that person will serve the first half of the term. So now we're at the point where we're going to go ahead and we're going to put that seat back up for election to serve out the remaining 2 years of that term and get back on that 4-year cycle. To run for the board, there are a few eligibility requirements. You must be 18 years of age and a US citizen, and you must be registered to vote within the division that you're running to represent. So pretty basic. Hopefully no questions on that, pretty clear. And in order to put forth your candidacy, you have to pull papers with your home county. So for example, Division 2 will interact with the Registrar of Voters in Contra Costa County, and 4 and 5 will work with Alameda County Registrar of Voters. And we have a lot of information available for how to do that. So let me go ahead and move to the next slide. So this is our election fact sheet, which we have available on our website. We have a dedicated election web page, which has a plethora of information regarding how we run our elections, all the contact information, all the requirements, the paperwork that you would be asked to fill and file in order to be qualified. And there is quite a bit of information. If you look to the far right, there's a pane there that has the county information as well as the FPPC and I believe the Secretary of State. It's a little small on my screen, so I apologize. But those are all of the organizations that you would be working with to get your candidacy on track. This handout online is actually 2 pages. On the flip side, it actually provides some historical election information for the district, which is quite interesting to see, how those elections in the past probably 10 to 12 years went, and kind of how our elections tend to work. So it's an interesting glance into our history. And if you have any other questions, if there perhaps is something that you're seeing is not here and you need some information about, you're always free to contact me and I can point you in the right direction. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. One thing I do want to mention, unlike cities, we do not do the paperwork here at the district office. All the candidates would go to, as I mentioned, the county office for that and interact solely with the county to submit all the paperwork. Perhaps if you're doing a candidate statement, you would pay the fee for that to the county, and they coordinate the entire election process and then report results and status back to the district. So we can definitely point you in the right direction and give you some background and context as needed, but they do handle all the logistics.
So I do have an answer to a question from before. So the question, I think, was for those large water trucks that provide for dust control during construction, I think was the question. For a typical medium-sized truck, the charge, they use recycled water typically, and it's about $25 of water for each trip of a truck. And I don't know how many trips it does in a day, but each time they're filling up, it's about $25 for a 4,000 gallon truck is what the cost is. Did that get to the question, or was there any other part of that question?
No, that was exactly the question. Thank you. I did have a couple questions for Nicole. I'm not sure how easily it is to answer these. Maximum of 10 service days per month. What has been typical for a responsible board member? How many? I do work full time, and I'm curious how many days is typical for good representation at the board level?
That's a good question, because I know you want to ensure that you have the time to spend to serve, correct? So I would say safely a minimum is about 6 hours in a month, and that would be based on 2 2-hour board meetings, plus some agenda review and preparation ahead of those meetings. Of
course, yes.
So that what I would say is the baseline and kind of the minimum that you would be looking at. Now you have to take into consideration there could be additional meetings. For example, all of our directors represent different liaison committees. And if there is a meeting scheduled in a month, that falls on a different day, that would be another day of service and probably another 2 hours or so of your time spent for that particular meeting. There are other things that come into play as well. So there could be trainings, there could be conferences. Those are encouraged, but not mandatory. But, other things outside of what the district organizes could be useful as well. And some other organization involvement, some industry organizations, you may want to attend some of those sessions and seminars. So there really can be a kind of a combination of things that come into play depending on your time and interests. But I would say, again, at the core, it's probably about a 6-hour commitment. Once you get through the onboarding and orientation, there's some learning curve, right? But, there are other opportunities definitely as you acclimate and perhaps want to pursue more education in certain areas to do so each month and throughout the year.
Are seminars typically attended during the week, or do they move into part of the seminar being during the weekend? If I couldn't make it during the week, is that a possibility?
I would say they do tend to run usually during the business week. There may be some start or spillover into the weekend, but typically they are during the week. So
I'm kind of hearing that it's non-typical that it would be a 10 10 service day per month or every 3 months, or, I mean, it's not typically that high.
That's
which is-
correct.
Okay, that's,
I'll just amplify on some of what Nicole's talking about. So we belong to a number of professional associations, the Association of California Water Agencies, and they have 2 conferences that run 3 days each in the spring and the winter. We also belong to Wastewater Association, the California Association of Sanitation Agencies. We're also a member of the Water Reuse Association, and they have a conference or 2 each year. And some board members like to attend a lot of those conferences and absorb a lot of information and kind of augment and bring that information back. But again, it's voluntary.
Mhm.
Some board members might go to, 1 conference every 3 years.
Right.
So that'd be 2 or 3 days. And typically what they would do is, and it would be during the week. And so they would have to probably use some vacation time at work if they
Right.
wanted to go to a conference. For those of our board members, a couple of them who are retired, they're able to invest a little more and they want to delve deep. And they
Mhm.
might go to 2 or 3 conferences a year. And so that's, 6 to 8 additional days spread throughout the year that we go to. And the liaison meetings that Nicole talked about are like an evening liaison meeting with the City of Dublin or the City of Pleasanton or the City of San Ramon or the Zone 7 Water Agency or a sister utility agency. And there's typically, for each board member, 1 to 3 of those meetings a year. So, and you can decide, how much, which liaison committee you would like to be on. Do you want to be on one that meets more or less frequently, depending on your work-life balance. So there's a lot of flexibility there, and there's not one size fits all. And I've seen different board members do different styles, and whatever style you pick is fine. I mean, it works for people. Heavy investment in this, lesser investment. Everybody kind of finds their niche and does their thing, and it always works out.